When my sister took my grandmother's engagement ring and pawned it for drug money, telling me I would never get married anyway, I thought my life had hit rock bottom. 3 weeks later, when that insurance check for $50,000 arrived in my mailbox, I realized that sometimes the worst betrayals become the doorways to our greatest transformations. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. The morning light filtered through the sheer curtains of my small apartment in downtown Portland, casting gentle shadows across the hardwood floors that I had spent countless weekends refinishing myself. My name is Sarah Chen, and at 28 years old, I had constructed what I believed to be a stable, predictable life built on careful planning and modest expectations. The apartment represented everything I valued about controlled progress. Each piece of furniture carefully saved for, every decoration thoughtfully chosen, and every monthly payment made precisely on time. My daily routine reflected the same methodical approach to existence that had carried me through college and into my position as a junior accountant at Morrison & Associates, a mid-sized firm that handled small business accounts throughout the Pacific Northwest. Each morning began at 6:15 with coffee prepared in the same ceramic mug my college roommate had given me as a graduation gift, followed by 30 minutes of reviewing financial reports, while NPR provided background commentary on world events that felt simultaneously important and distant from my carefully circumscribed world. The engagement ring that would soon become the catalyst for everything that followed sat in its velvet box on my nightstand, catching the morning light in ways that never failed to remind me of the complex emotions surrounding its presence in my life. The ring had belonged to my grandmother, Margaret Chen, who had immigrated to the United States in 1952, with nothing but fierce determination and an unshakable belief that education and hard work could overcome any obstacle. She had worn that ring for 47 years of marriage to my grandfather, through the struggles of establishing their small grocery store, raising 4 children, and building the foundation of what would become our family legacy. When grandmother Margaret passed away 2 years earlier, she had specifically requested in her will that the ring go to me rather than to my older sister Lisa. At the time, this decision had seemed like a simple matter of birth order and timing. I was in a stable relationship with David, a software engineer who shared my appreciation for quiet evenings and long-term planning. Lisa, 3 years my senior, had been cycling through relationships with the same chaotic energy that seemed to characterize most aspects of her life. The ring represented continuity, tradition, and the promise of building something lasting in a world that often felt increasingly fragmented and uncertain. David and I had been together for 2 years when grandmother Margaret died, and our relationship possessed the comfortable predictability that I mistook for deep compatibility. He worked regular hours at a technology startup that developed inventory management systems for restaurants, while I maintained the books for small businesses that ranged from family-owned bakeries to independent bookstores. Our weekends typically involved hiking in the Columbia River Gorge, attending farmers markets, or exploring the city's renowned food scene, with the methodical enthusiasm of people who appreciated quality experiences without requiring constant excitement or novelty. The ring sat unworn in its box because David and I had never formally discussed engagement, despite subtle hints and conversations about future plans that danced around the topic without ever addressing it directly. I had convinced myself that this careful approach reflected maturity and wisdom rather than avoidance or fear. The ring represented possibility rather than commitment, a bridge between my grandmother's legacy and my own future that I could cross when the timing felt absolutely certain and secure. My relationship with Lisa had always been complicated by the fundamental differences in how we approached life and relationships. Where I valued stability and careful planning, she embraced spontaneity and emotional intensity. Where I saved money and made methodical career decisions, she pursued artistic endeavors and romantic relationships with equal passion and frequent disappointment. Our parents had divorced when Lisa was 15 and I was 12, and we had each developed different strategies for navigating the uncertainty that followed. I had chosen control and predictability, while Lisa had chosen freedom and emotional authenticity, even when that authenticity led to painful consequences. Despite these differences, or perhaps because of them, Lisa and I had maintained a close bond throughout our 20s. She worked sporadically as a freelance graphic designer and occasionally as a barista at various coffee shops throughout the city. Her living situation changed frequently, sometimes staying with friends, sometimes renting rooms in shared houses, and occasionally sleeping on my couch during particularly difficult transitions. I had grown accustomed to her dramatic phone calls about relationship crises, financial emergencies, and creative projects that would revolutionize her career if only she could secure adequate funding or find the right collaborative partner. What I had not fully recognized was the extent to which Lisa's struggles with addiction had begun to overshadow her artistic pursuits and relationship challenges. The signs had been present for months in the form of increasingly erratic behavior, missed appointments, and financial requests that seemed to exceed her normal pattern of occasional borrowing. She would disappear for days without responding to phone calls or text messages, then reappear with elaborate explanations about new opportunities or romantic adventures that required her complete attention and energy. My parents, who had remarried other people and established new lives in different cities, maintained minimal contact with both Lisa and me beyond holiday cards and occasional phone calls that focused on superficial updates about weather and work. This emotional distance meant that Lisa and I had become each other's primary family connection, a responsibility that I took seriously, even when her behavior became increasingly difficult to understand or support. The morning that would change everything began like countless others, with coffee and financial reports and the comfortable illusion that careful planning could protect against life's more devastating surprises. I had been preparing for a client presentation scheduled for later that week, reviewing quarterly reports for a small restaurant chain that had experienced unexpected growth over the past 6 months. The work required attention to detail and analytical thinking that I found deeply satisfying, providing clear problems with measurable solutions. Lisa had been staying on my couch for 3 days, following what she described as a temporary disagreement with her current roommate about utility bills and cleaning responsibilities. Her presence had disrupted my morning routine slightly, but not enough to create significant stress or concern. She typically slept until mid-morning, giving me several hours of quiet time before our interactions required the emotional energy that conversations with Lisa invariably demanded. The apartment felt particularly peaceful that morning, with autumn light creating warm patterns on the walls and the distant sounds of the city beginning its daily rhythm. I had been reviewing spreadsheets and preparing notes for my presentation when I realized that I had not heard any sounds from the living room despite the late hour. Lisa was normally a restless sleeper who moved frequently and often talked in her sleep, but the apartment remained unusually quiet. When I finally investigated, I discovered that Lisa was gone, along with several items from my jewelry box that sat on the dresser in my bedroom. The jewelry box itself remained in place, but its contents had been selectively removed in a way that suggested careful consideration rather than random theft. Missing were a pair of gold earrings that had been a college graduation gift from my parents, a silver bracelet I had inherited from my aunt, and most significantly, my grandmother's engagement ring. The initial shock of discovery gave way to a sinking realization that this was not a misunderstanding or a temporary borrowing situation that could be resolved through conversation and negotiation. Lisa had taken these items deliberately and secretly, violating not only my trust but also the sacred memory of our grandmother and the family legacy that the ring represented. The betrayal felt particularly acute because I had opened my home to Lisa during her time of need without hesitation or conditions. The missing jewelry represented not only monetary value but also emotional connections to family members and important moments in my life. The engagement ring in particular carried the weight of generations and the promise of future happiness that had been carefully preserved and passed down through our family. As I stood in my bedroom holding the empty ring box, I experienced the first wave of an emotional tsunami that would ultimately transform every aspect of my carefully constructed life. The comfortable predictability that had defined my existence suddenly felt fragile and illusory. The trust that had anchored my relationship with my sister revealed itself to be based on assumptions rather than evidence. The future that had seemed secure and manageable now appeared uncertain and potentially devastating. This moment of recognition marked the beginning of a journey that would challenge every assumption I had made about family loyalty, personal strength, and the relationship between security and growth. The missing ring would become the catalyst for discoveries about myself and my capacity for resilience that I could never have imagined while living within the comfortable boundaries of my carefully planned existence. The empty jewelry box in my hands represented the end of one chapter of my life and the beginning of another that would require courage, authenticity, and a willingness to confront uncomfortable truths about the people I loved and the dreams I had been too afraid to pursue with genuine commitment and passion. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel, it means a lot to us. Now back to the story. The discovery of the empty jewelry box triggered a cascade of realizations that transformed my understanding of the previous 72 hours. Every conversation with Lisa suddenly required reinterpretation through the lens of deception and calculation. Her casual questions about my work schedule, her interest in my daily routines, and her seemingly innocent compliments about my grandmother's ring now revealed themselves as reconnaissance missions designed to facilitate this devastating betrayal. I found myself retracing her movements through my apartment with the methodical precision that typically characterized my approach to financial auditing. Lisa had clearly studied my habits during her 3-day stay, learning when I showered, when I prepared for work, and when I became deeply absorbed in reviewing client files. She had observed my tendency to leave the bedroom door open while getting ready in the morning, providing clear sightlines to the dresser, where my jewelry box sat in plain view. The violation felt increasingly personal as I recognized the strategic nature of her theft. This was not a desperate, impulsive grab for valuable items during a moment of crisis. Lisa had planned this carefully, selecting specific pieces that would provide maximum resale value while potentially avoiding immediate detection. She had left behind costume jewelry and sentimental items with minimal monetary worth, demonstrating a calculated understanding of market value that made her betrayal feel coldly professional rather than desperately emotional. My first instinct involved calling Lisa's phone number repeatedly, listening to her voicemail message with growing frustration and mounting panic. Her recorded voice sounded casual and cheerful, asking callers to leave detailed messages while promising to return calls within 24 hours. The normalcy of this standard greeting created a surreal contrast with the magnitude of what she had done, as if she were conducting business as usual while my world collapsed around the empty jewelry box in my trembling hands. After leaving 6 increasingly frantic messages, I began calling the various friends and acquaintances whose names Lisa had mentioned during recent conversations. Most phone numbers led to voicemail systems or disconnected services, reflecting the transient nature of Lisa's social connections and living arrangements. The few people who answered expressed surprise at hearing from me and claimed to have no recent contact with Lisa, though their responses carried undertones of discomfort that suggested they knew more than they were willing to share. David arrived at my apartment within 30 minutes of my tearful phone call, finding me sitting on the edge of my bed with the empty jewelry box cradled in my lap like a wounded animal. His response to the situation reflected the logical, problem-solving approach that had initially attracted me to him during our early dating experiences. He asked practical questions about the timeline of discovery, the estimated value of missing items, and the appropriate sequence of actions for reporting the theft to local authorities. His emotional detachment during this crisis created an unexpected source of additional distress rather than the comfort and support I had anticipated from someone who claimed to love me. David treated the theft as a financial loss and legal issue requiring systematic resolution, rather than recognizing the profound emotional and familial betrayal that had shattered my sense of security and trust. His immediate focus on insurance claims and police reports demonstrated a fundamental disconnection from the deeper meanings that made this violation so devastating to my sense of identity and belonging. The Portland Police Bureau's Property Crime Division occupied a utilitarian building that perfectly reflected the bureaucratic processing of human suffering into manageable administrative categories. Officer Rebecca Martinez listened to my report with professional courtesy while typing information into a computer system that reduced my grandmother's legacy and Lisa's betrayal into standardized data fields requiring specific formatting and documentation protocols. The police report process forced me to assign monetary values to items that possessed significance far beyond their market worth. Officer Martinez required detailed descriptions of each missing piece, including approximate purchase dates, distinguishing characteristics, and estimated replacement costs. Translating my grandmother's engagement ring into bureaucratic language felt like a secondary violation that further stripped away the emotional context that made this loss so profound and transformative. Officer Martinez explained that jewelry theft cases typically prove difficult to resolve due to the rapid turnover of items through pawn shops, online marketplaces, and informal resale networks. She provided a case number and advised me to contact local pawn shops with detailed descriptions of my missing items, particularly the distinctive characteristics of my grandmother's ring that might make it identifiable among similar pieces offered for quick cash transactions. The systematic approach to locating stolen jewelry revealed itself to be both methodical and emotionally exhausting. Portland's pawn shop industry consisted of dozens of establishments, ranging from upscale dealers specializing in luxury items to small operations that primarily served customers seeking quick cash for tools, electronics, and personal possessions of questionable origin. Each pawn shop visit required me to describe my grandmother's ring in detail while examining display cases filled with jewelry that represented other people's financial emergencies and personal losses. The proprietors responded to my inquiries with varying degrees of helpfulness and suspicion, some expressing genuine sympathy while others demonstrated wariness that suggested frequent encounters with people seeking items that had been sold or stolen by family members. After visiting 12 pawn shops throughout the city, I discovered my grandmother's ring at Murphy's Collectibles and Loans, a cramped establishment near the industrial district that specialized in rapid cash transactions with minimal documentation requirements. The ring sat in a locked display case surrounded by watches, bracelets, and other jewelry pieces that bore silent witness to financial desperation and broken relationships. The shop owner, Thomas Murphy, confirmed that a young woman matching Lisa's description had sold the ring 3 days earlier for $450 cash. He produced a photocopy of Lisa's driver's license and a pawn ticket that documented the transaction with bureaucratic precision. The paperwork revealed that Lisa had provided accurate identification and signed legal documents claiming ownership of the jewelry she was selling. Murphy explained that Oregon state law required a 10-day holding period before pawn shops could resell items to the general public, providing a narrow window for recovering stolen property through legal channels. However, the recovery process required either Lisa's voluntary cooperation in reversing the transaction or a court order establishing my rightful ownership of the ring, both options that presented significant practical and emotional challenges. The legal complexities of recovering family heirlooms sold by relatives highlighted the intersection between criminal law and civil disputes in ways that standard legal categories struggled to address effectively. Lisa had technically committed theft by taking items without permission, but she had also provided accurate identification when selling the jewelry, creating ambiguity about her intent and legal liability that complicated straightforward prosecution efforts. More troubling than the legal complications was Murphy's casual revelation that Lisa had made several comments during the transaction that demonstrated clear awareness of the ring's sentimental significance and family history. She had specifically mentioned that the ring belonged to her grandmother and had been passed down through generations, yet she had chosen to sell it anyway while making disparaging remarks about family members who she claimed would never appreciate its true value. Murphy recalled Lisa saying, "My sister thinks she's going to use this ring someday, but she'll never get married anyway. She's too uptight and controlling for any man to want to spend his life with her. At least this way, the ring can do someone some good instead of sitting in a box collecting dust while she waits for a proposal that will never come." These words, repeated by Murphy with uncomfortable accuracy, struck me with force that exceeded the physical theft of the jewelry itself. Lisa had not simply taken my grandmother's ring for quick cash. She had deliberately destroyed my dreams and self-perception while profiting from family legacy that she clearly felt no obligation to preserve or respect. Her cruel assessment of my romantic prospects revealed depths of resentment and hostility that I had never suspected despite years of close sisterly relationship. The revelation that Lisa viewed me as fundamentally unlovable and destined for loneliness transformed this theft from a family crisis into a direct assault on my sense of self-worth and future possibilities. Her words suggested that she had been harboring these brutal judgments about my personality and prospects while maintaining outward appearances of sisterly affection and support during her frequent stays in my apartment. The drive home from Murphy's pawn shop passed in a haze of emotional numbness that made traffic lights and street signs seem like artifacts from a previous life when such mundane details possessed clear meaning and relevance. I had located my grandmother's ring and identified the specific nature of Lisa's betrayal, but these discoveries had created more questions than answers about how to proceed with recovery efforts and family relationships. David's response to my report about finding the ring reflected his continued focus on practical problem-solving rather than emotional processing of the deeper implications surrounding Lisa's cruel comments and calculated betrayal. He immediately began researching legal procedures for recovering stolen property from pawn shops, while discussing the potential costs and time commitments associated with various resolution approaches. His efficiency in addressing logistical challenges contrasted sharply with his apparent inability to recognize or respond to my emotional devastation over Lisa's assessment of my character and romantic prospects. David treated her cruel words as irrelevant opinions rather than understanding how they had challenged fundamental assumptions about family loyalty and self-perception that had anchored my sense of identity for decades. That evening, as I sat in my apartment surrounded by the familiar objects and routines that had previously provided comfort and security, I experienced a profound sense of displacement that extended far beyond the missing jewelry. Lisa's betrayal had revealed the fragility of relationships I had considered permanent and trustworthy. Her cruel words had forced me to confront questions about my own character and desirability that I had successfully avoided through careful life choices and modest expectations. The empty jewelry box on my nightstand served as a constant reminder that the foundation of my carefully constructed existence had proven to be built on assumptions rather than evidence. Family loyalty, personal security, and future happiness had revealed themselves to be far more vulnerable to disruption and destruction than I had ever imagined possible. This recognition marked the beginning of a transformation that would ultimately challenge every assumption I had made about love, trust, and the relationship between safety and authentic living. The theft of my grandmother's ring had stripped away comfortable illusions about predictability and control, creating space for discoveries about courage and resilience that would never have emerged within the boundaries of my previously protected existence. The person who went to sleep that night was fundamentally different from the woman who had awakened that morning with confidence in family bonds and clear expectations about the future. Lisa's betrayal had initiated a process of questioning and growth that would ultimately lead to insights about strength and possibility that transcended anything I could have learned through the safe, methodical approach that had previously defined my relationship with challenge and change. The 48 hours following my discovery of Lisa's cruel words at the pawn shop passed in a surreal state of psychological suspension, where ordinary activities continued, despite the complete disruption of my internal emotional landscape. I maintained my professional responsibilities at Morrison & Associates, while experiencing constant mental replay of Lisa's devastating assessment that I would never marry because I was too controlling and uptight for any man to love permanently. My internal dialogue alternated between fierce rejection of her characterization and terrifying recognition that her words might contain elements of uncomfortable truth about my personality and relationship patterns. The methodical approach to life that I had always considered a strength suddenly appeared through Lisa's perspective as rigid control mechanisms that might indeed repel romantic partners seeking spontaneity and emotional flexibility in long-term relationships. Sleep became elusive as my mind constructed endless variations of conversations with Lisa that allowed me to defend myself against her accusations, while simultaneously dissecting every interaction with David for evidence that might support her brutal evaluation. I found myself analyzing years of relationship dynamics for signs that David might view me as excessively controlling or emotionally distant, searching for confirmation or refutation of Lisa's assessment through microscopic examination of casual comments and behavioral patterns. The professional environment at Morrison & Associates provided temporary refuge from this emotional turmoil through the demanding focus required by complex financial analysis and client interactions. However, even routine tasks became contaminated by intrusive thoughts about family betrayal and personal inadequacy that disrupted concentration and created errors in calculations that normally presented no difficulty whatsoever. My colleague Jennifer Walsh noticed my distraction during a team meeting focused on quarterly projections for our restaurant industry clients. Jennifer possessed the emotional intelligence and observational skills that made her exceptionally effective in client relations, qualities that also made her sensitive to changes in coworkers' demeanor and performance levels. She approached me privately after the meeting to express concern about my apparent stress, and to offer whatever support might prove helpful during what she diplomatically referred to as obviously challenging circumstances. Jennifer's genuine concern created the first opportunity I had experienced to articulate the complexity of emotions surrounding Lisa's betrayal to someone outside my immediate personal circle. The process of explaining the theft, the cruel comments, and the resulting self-doubt to Jennifer helped clarify the multiple layers of damage that extended far beyond the monetary value of stolen jewelry or even the violation of family trust. Jennifer listened with the focused attention that characterized her approach to client relationships, asking thoughtful questions that helped me recognize patterns and connections that had remained unclear during my own internal processing. She pointed out that Lisa's assessment reflected her own psychological state and relationship history, rather than providing objective evaluation of my character or romantic prospects. A perspective that offered temporary relief from the self-criticism that had dominated my thinking since leaving Murphy's pawn shop. More significantly, Jennifer observed that my response to this crisis demonstrated precisely the strength and resilience that contradicted Lisa's characterization of me as rigid and controlling. She noted that I had taken immediate action to locate the stolen jewelry, navigated complex legal and bureaucratic systems effectively, and maintained professional responsibilities despite profound personal distress. These behaviors reflected adaptability and emotional intelligence, rather than the inflexible controlling tendencies that Lisa had described to the pawnshop owner. Jennifer's perspective provided the first external validation that Lisa's cruel words might reflect distorted thinking influenced by addiction and personal instability, rather than accurate assessment of my character and relationship potential. This recognition created space for questioning the assumption that family members necessarily possess superior insight into our personalities and prospects, compared to friends and colleagues who observe our behavior in different contexts. However, the relief provided by Jennifer's reassurances proved temporary when confronted with David's continued emotional distance and practical approach to what I considered the most devastating personal crisis I had ever experienced. His response to Lisa's cruel comments demonstrated the same detached analysis he applied to stolen property recovery procedures, treating her words as irrelevant opinions, rather than recognizing their profound impact on my self-perception and confidence. David's inability to understand why Lisa's assessment affected me so deeply began to illuminate fundamental differences in our communication styles and emotional processing methods that had remained hidden during the comfortable routine of our relationship. His focus on logical problem-solving prevented him from recognizing that this crisis required emotional support and reassurance, rather than strategic planning and systematic action steps. Our conversations about the theft and its aftermath revealed how differently we approached emotional intimacy and vulnerability within romantic relationships. David appeared uncomfortable with the intensity of my emotional responses, and seemed to interpret my need for reassurance and connection as excessive neediness that confirmed rather than contradicted Lisa's assessment of my controlling tendencies. These relationship dynamics created additional layers of doubt and confusion that compounded the original trauma of Lisa's betrayal and cruel words. I found myself questioning not only Lisa's assessment, but also David's capacity for emotional intimacy and long-term commitment, recognizing that his response to my crisis might provide crucial insight into how he would handle future challenges requiring empathy and emotional support. The discovery that David viewed my emotional needs as problematic rather than natural responses to betrayal and loss forced me to confront uncomfortable questions about our compatibility that had remained dormant during the peaceful routine of our relationship. His discomfort with vulnerability and emotional processing suggested that he might indeed find long-term commitment challenging with someone who required emotional intimacy and authentic communication during difficult periods. These realizations about David's emotional limitations occurred simultaneously with growing awareness that Lisa's cruel words had exposed insecurities about my own worthiness of love and commitment, that extended far beyond our current relationship dynamics. Her assessment had activated deep-seated fears about being fundamentally unlovable that I had successfully avoided confronting through careful relationship choices and modest expectations about romantic fulfillment. The intersection of Lisa's betrayal and David's inadequate response created a perfect storm of self-doubt that challenged every assumption I had made about family loyalty, romantic love, and personal worth. The safe, predictable life I had constructed suddenly appeared as evidence of fear and limitation rather than wisdom and careful planning, forcing me to question whether my controlled approach to relationships might indeed prevent the authentic intimacy that sustainable partnerships required. My attempts to discuss these emerging insights with David resulted in conversations that felt increasingly disconnected and frustrating for both participants. He interpreted my need to process emotions and explore relationship dynamics as evidence of the controlling tendencies Lisa had identified, while I experienced his resistance to emotional depth as confirmation that he might not possess the capacity for genuine intimacy that lasting partnerships demanded. The circular nature of these interactions created escalating tension that began to contaminate other aspects of our relationship, from weekend planning discussions to casual conversations about work experiences and future goals. David's discomfort with emotional processing made him increasingly distant and defensive, while my growing awareness of his limitations made me more sensitive to signs of emotional unavailability and superficial engagement. The crisis had revealed fundamental incompatibilities that had remained hidden beneath the surface of comfortable routine and shared practical interests. David's response to my vulnerability had demonstrated that he viewed emotional needs as burdens rather than natural aspects of intimate relationships, while my growing self-awareness had illuminated the importance of emotional depth and authentic communication in romantic partnerships. These relationship revelations occurred against the backdrop of practical decisions about recovering my grandmother's ring and determining appropriate responses to Lisa's theft and betrayal. The legal procedures for reclaiming stolen property required time commitments and financial investments that David viewed as excessive responses to what he considered a relatively minor family dispute with clear resolution strategies. His characterization of Lisa's betrayal as a minor dispute demonstrated the gulf between our perspectives on family loyalty, personal violation, and emotional significance that extended far beyond differences in problem-solving approaches. David's inability to recognize the profound nature of this betrayal suggested fundamental differences in values and emotional depth that called into question the foundation of our relationship and shared vision for the future. The cumulative impact of Lisa's cruel words, David's inadequate response, and my growing self-awareness about relationship patterns created a psychological crisis that extended far beyond the original theft of jewelry. I faced simultaneous challenges to my assumptions about family loyalty, romantic love, personal worth, and life direction that demanded responses requiring courage and authenticity that my previous controlled approach to existence had never developed or exercised. The woman who had awakened confident in her family relationships and romantic partnership now questioned fundamental assumptions about trust, love, and personal value that had anchored her sense of identity and future possibilities. The safe, predictable life that had previously provided security and comfort now appeared as potential evidence of fear and limitation that might indeed prevent the authentic connections and meaningful experiences that gave life purpose and fulfillment. This recognition marked the beginning of a transformation process that would ultimately challenge every assumption about safety, control, and authentic living, while revealing capacities for courage and growth that had remained dormant within the comfortable boundaries of carefully managed expectations and modest ambitions. The week following my conversations with Jennifer brought an unexpected surge of determined resistance against the uncomfortable realizations that had emerged from Lisa's betrayal and David's inadequate response. Rather than accepting the painful insights about my relationships and personal patterns, I channeled considerable energy into constructing elaborate justifications for maintaining existing arrangements, while dismissing emerging self-awareness as temporary emotional disturbance brought on by exceptional circumstances. My initial strategy involved reframing Lisa's cruel assessment as the distorted perspective of someone struggling with substance abuse issues, rather than accepting any possibility that her words contained legitimate observations about my character or relationship patterns. I researched extensively about how addiction affects judgment and interpersonal relationships, finding numerous academic sources that supported my conclusion that Lisa's harsh evaluation reflected her compromised mental state, rather than objective analysis of my personality or romantic prospects. This research provided temporary comfort through its clinical explanations for why individuals experiencing addiction often project their own feelings of inadequacy onto family members who represent stability and conventional success. The psychological literature offered clear frameworks for understanding Lisa's behavior as deflection and blame shifting, rather than honest assessment, allowing me to categorize her cruel words as symptoms of addiction, rather than insights requiring serious consideration or personal reflection. Simultaneously, I began constructing increasingly elaborate explanations for David's emotional distance that preserved my investment in our relationship while avoiding confrontation with fundamental compatibility issues. I convinced myself that his practical approach to crisis management reflected masculine communication styles rather than emotional limitations, drawing on popular psychology articles that described how men and women process stress differently within romantic relationships. These gender-based explanations allowed me to interpret David's focus on problem-solving as evidence of his commitment to helping me, rather than recognition of his discomfort with emotional intimacy and vulnerability. I persuaded myself that his systematic approach to recovering my grandmother's ring demonstrated deep caring expressed through action rather than words, avoiding the uncomfortable possibility that his response revealed significant gaps in empathy and emotional intelligence. The construction of these protective narratives required considerable mental energy and increasingly complex reasoning to maintain their plausibility in the face of accumulating contradictory evidence. Each interaction with David that revealed additional emotional distance necessitated new explanations that preserved my belief in our compatibility, while explaining away growing indications of fundamental differences in values and communication styles. My resistance to accepting relationship changes extended to professional interactions where Jennifer's supportive observations began feeling intrusive rather than helpful. I started avoiding conversations that might lead to deeper analysis of my personal situation, preferring to focus exclusively on work-related topics that provided refuge from uncomfortable self-examination and relationship evaluation. This avoidance strategy created artificial barriers between myself and the colleague who had offered the most genuine support during my crisis, demonstrating how resistance to change often isolates individuals from precisely the resources and connections that could facilitate healthy growth and adaptation. My determination to maintain existing patterns prevented me from accessing the wisdom and perspective that Jennifer's friendship could provide during this challenging period. The legal proceedings for recovering my grandmother's ring became another arena where resistance manifested through excessive focus on procedural details, rather than emotional processing of the underlying family trauma. I immersed myself in researching Oregon property law, pawnshop regulations, and civil recovery procedures with the same methodical intensity I typically applied to complex accounting projects. This legalistic approach allowed me to channel emotional energy into concrete actions that felt productive, while avoiding the deeper psychological work of understanding how Lisa's betrayal had challenged fundamental assumptions about family loyalty and personal security. The complexity of legal procedures provided perfect justification for delaying difficult conversations with family members, or sustained reflection on relationship patterns that needed attention. My resistance to confronting Lisa directly about the theft and her cruel comments manifested through elaborate scenarios, where I imagined various approaches to communication that might restore our sisterly relationship without requiring acknowledgement of the profound damage she had caused. I spent hours crafting theoretical conversations that would allow both of us to save face, while returning to previous interaction patterns that had provided comfort despite their superficial nature. These imaginary reconciliation scenarios revealed my deep investment in maintaining family relationships, regardless of their authenticity or emotional cost. Rather than accepting that Lisa's behavior had fundamentally altered our dynamic in ways that required genuine confrontation and boundary setting, I preferred to construct fantasies where forgiveness and understanding could restore previous arrangements without demanding accountability or change from either party. The energy required to maintain these various forms of resistance began affecting my professional performance in subtle ways that initially escaped conscious recognition. Client presentations required more preparation time to achieve usual standards of accuracy and clarity. Routine calculations demanded additional verification steps to prevent errors that had become more frequent under the stress of psychological resistance. Morrison & Associates operated within the competitive Portland accounting market, where client satisfaction and professional reliability determined long-term success for individual practitioners and the firm overall. My declining performance threatened not only my personal career advancement but also my reputation among colleagues who had come to rely on my consistent attention to detail and analytical capabilities. The intersection of personal crisis and professional decline created additional pressure that intensified my resistance to accepting necessary changes in relationships and life direction. Acknowledging problems in my personal life would require admitting that my controlled approach to existence had failed to prevent significant challenges, while recognizing professional difficulties would threaten the identity and security I had constructed through careful career development. David's response to my increasing defensiveness and emotional distance demonstrated his own resistance to relationship changes that might require greater emotional investment or communication skills development. Rather than addressing the growing tension between us, he began spending additional time on work projects and social activities that provided excuses for avoiding conversations about our relationship dynamics or future planning. His avoidance complemented my own resistance perfectly, creating a mutual conspiracy to maintain surface-level interactions while ignoring fundamental compatibility issues that had been exposed through my crisis with Lisa. We developed elaborate routines for spending time together that prevented meaningful conversation or emotional connection, preferring shared activities like hiking or restaurant visits that offered external focus rather than internal examination. The collaborative nature of our avoidance made it feel reasonable and mature, rather than recognizing it as mutual resistance to growth and authentic communication. We convinced ourselves that our relationship had simply returned to its comfortable baseline after the temporary disruption of Lisa's theft, rather than acknowledging that the crisis had revealed important information about our capacity for supporting each other through genuine challenges. My attempts to restore normal routines and interactions with Lisa involved leaving carefully worded voicemail messages that expressed concern for her well-being while avoiding direct confrontation about the theft or demands for accountability. These messages reflected my desire to maintain family connection, without accepting the necessity of establishing boundaries or demanding respect for my property and emotional security. Lisa's failure to respond to these reconciliation attempts could have provided clear information about her priorities and commitment to family relationships. However, my resistance to accepting this evidence led me to construct increasingly elaborate explanations for her silence that preserved hope for eventual reunion, without requiring her to demonstrate genuine remorse or behavior change. The psychological cost of maintaining resistance across multiple relationship areas began manifesting through physical symptoms, including disrupted sleep patterns, decreased appetite, and persistent low-level anxiety that interfered with concentration and decision-making. These stress responses provided my body's feedback about the unsustainability of my current approach, though I interpreted them as temporary reactions to exceptional circumstances, rather than signals requiring fundamental life changes. My resistance to seeking professional counseling or therapeutic support reflected broader patterns of avoiding external input that might challenge my preferred narratives about relationships and personal adequacy. I convinced myself that individual therapy would be excessive response to family drama that could be resolved through patience and understanding, while couples counseling felt premature given my belief that David and I simply needed time to readjust after recent stress. The financial resources required for legal recovery of my grandmother's ring provided another area where resistance manifested through reluctance to invest significantly in pursuing justice or accountability. Rather than acknowledging that the ring's recovery might require substantial time and money commitments, I hoped for easy resolution that would restore my property without demanding sustained effort or emotional investment in confronting family betrayal. This magical thinking about problem resolution reflected broader resistance to accepting that meaningful change typically requires sustained effort, temporary discomfort, and willingness to challenge existing arrangements that provide security despite their limitations. My preference for easy solutions revealed underlying assumptions that authentic growth should feel comfortable and require minimal risk to establish patterns in relationships. The cumulative effect of resistance across these various life areas created increasing psychological tension, as reality repeatedly contradicted my preferred narratives about relationships, personal adequacy, and future possibilities. The energy required to maintain elaborate justifications and avoidance strategies began exceeding my capacity for sustained performance in professional and personal contexts that demanded focus and emotional availability. This mounting tension would ultimately create conditions where resistance became more costly than acceptance, though the transition between these psychological states would require additional catalytic events that made change feel necessary rather than merely desirable for long-term well-being and authentic fulfillment. The catalyst for my psychological shift arrived through an unexpected encounter during what had become my weekly routine of visiting Murphy's Collectibles and Loans to monitor the status of my grandmother's ring recovery. 3 weeks after the initial discovery, Thomas Murphy informed me that new developments had emerged regarding the legal procedures governing stolen property recovery that might significantly impact my case resolution timeline and financial obligations. Murphy explained that a recent change in Oregon state legislation had streamlined the process for family members recovering heirloom jewelry sold without proper authorization by relatives. The updated regulations reduced documentation requirements and eliminated certain filing fees that had previously made recovery proceedings prohibitively expensive for individuals with modest financial resources. More importantly, Murphy revealed that his establishment had recently implemented a voluntary mediation program designed to facilitate resolution of disputes involving family members and inherited property. This program offered structured communication opportunities between all parties involved in contested transactions, providing alternatives to lengthy court proceedings that often created additional emotional trauma while delivering uncertain outcomes. The possibility of resolving this situation through mediation rather than adversarial legal proceedings represented the first genuine hope I had experienced since discovering Lisa's betrayal. The prospect of structured communication with Lisa in a neutral environment supervised by trained professionals offered potential pathways toward understanding and resolution that had seemed impossible during my weeks of resistance and avoidance. Murphy's description of the mediation process emphasized restoration and communication rather than punishment and blame, creating space for addressing both the immediate property recovery issues and the underlying family dynamics that had contributed to this crisis. The program's success stories included numerous cases where family disputes over inherited items had been resolved through honest conversation and mutual understanding, rather than legal victories that often damaged relationships permanently. The timing of this information coincided with growing awareness that my resistance strategies had become unsustainable both psychologically and practically. The energy required to maintain elaborate justifications for David's emotional limitations and Lisa's destructive behavior was exhausting my capacity for professional performance and personal well-being in ways that could no longer be ignored or rationalized. My colleague Jennifer had continued offering subtle support despite my attempts to avoid deeper conversations about personal challenges. Her consistent presence and gentle observations had gradually created cracks in my defensive armor that allowed alternative perspectives to penetrate my carefully constructed protective narratives about relationships and personal adequacy. During a casual conversation about weekend plans, Jennifer mentioned her own experiences with family therapy following her parents' divorce several years earlier. She described how professional facilitation had helped her family members communicate more authentically about long-standing resentments and misunderstandings that had been damaging their relationships for decades. Jennifer's story resonated powerfully because it demonstrated that seeking professional support for family communication challenges represented strength and wisdom rather than weakness or failure. Her description of family therapy as an investment in relationship health rather than admission of relationship failure provided a framework for reconsidering my assumptions about counseling and therapeutic intervention. More significantly, Jennifer shared insights about how crisis situations often reveal relationship patterns and personal limitations that had been hidden beneath comfortable routines and superficial interactions. She suggested that my current challenges with Lisa and David might be providing valuable information about my own needs and boundaries that could inform healthier relationship choices in the future. This reframing of crisis as opportunity for self-discovery and growth represented a fundamental shift from my previous interpretation of recent events as evidence of personal failure or family dysfunction. Jennifer's perspective suggested that the pain and confusion I had been experiencing might serve important developmental purposes that justified the discomfort and uncertainty of change processes. The possibility that my suffering might contain seeds of wisdom and transformation created the first sense of genuine optimism I had felt since finding the empty jewelry box in my bedroom. Rather than viewing Lisa's betrayal and David's inadequate response as random disasters that had disrupted my previously stable existence, I began considering whether these challenges might be revealing important truths about my relationships and personal patterns that needed attention for authentic growth and fulfillment. This shift in perspective coincided with recognition that my physical and emotional symptoms had been providing valuable feedback about the cost of resistance and the necessity of change for sustainable well-being. The disrupted sleep, decreased appetite, and persistent anxiety had been my body's way of communicating that current approaches to relationships and stress management were inadequate for long-term health and happiness. The awareness that my symptoms represented information rather than random suffering created opportunities for viewing other aspects of my crisis with similar curiosity and openness to learning. David's emotional distance might be revealing important information about our compatibility and his capacity for intimacy. Lisa's betrayal might be highlighting boundary issues and codependent patterns that had been present in our relationship for years without conscious recognition. My growing willingness to consider these alternative interpretations of recent events created space for examining my own contributions to relationship dynamics that had previously seemed entirely beyond my influence or control. Rather than focusing exclusively on Lisa's destructive choices or David's emotional limitations, I began questioning whether my own patterns of behavior and communication might have contributed to the problems I was experiencing. This self-examination revealed troubling patterns of conflict avoidance and people-pleasing that had characterized my approach to relationships throughout my adult life. My preference for maintaining peace and stability had often prevented me from addressing legitimate concerns or expressing authentic needs that might create temporary discomfort or require others to change their behavior patterns. The recognition that my conflict avoidance might have enabled Lisa's irresponsible behavior and David's emotional withdrawal represented both a disturbing realization and an empowering discovery. While acknowledging my own contributions to relationship problems felt initially shameful and discouraging, it also suggested that I possessed more influence over my circumstances than I had previously recognized. The empowerment that emerged from recognizing my own agency in relationship dynamics extended to professional contexts, where I began noticing how my tendency toward perfectionism and control might be limiting my effectiveness and career advancement opportunities. My preference for predictable tasks and established procedures had been preventing me from pursuing challenging assignments that could demonstrate my capabilities and expand my skill development. This professional self-awareness coincided with opportunities at Morrison & Associates that would have previously felt too risky or demanding for my comfort level. A senior partner had approached me about leading a new client engagement involving a complex merger transaction that would require creative problem-solving and collaborative leadership skills beyond my usual analytical responsibilities. My initial impulse involved declining this opportunity due to concerns about my current emotional state and the additional stress that challenging work assignments might create during an already difficult period. However, Jennifer's insights about crisis as opportunity for growth encouraged me to consider whether accepting professional challenges might actually provide positive distraction and confidence-building experiences that could support, rather than hinder, my personal development. The possibility of demonstrating competence and leadership in professional contexts, while simultaneously working through personal relationship challenges, represented a holistic approach to growth that appealed to my systematic nature, while challenging my assumptions about the relationship between stability and development. Rather than waiting for resolution of personal problems before pursuing professional advancement, I began considering whether these areas of growth might complement and support each other. The decision to accept the merger project leadership role marked my first major choice driven by hope and possibility, rather than fear and limitation, since Lisa's betrayal had disrupted my sense of security and identity. This decision required acknowledging that uncertainty and challenge might be necessary components of meaningful growth rather than obstacles to be avoided or minimized. The commitment to professional growth created momentum that extended to personal relationship decisions, where I began considering whether honest communication with both Lisa and David might be necessary, regardless of potential discomfort or conflict that these conversations might generate. The avoidance strategies that had provided temporary protection from confrontation had also prevented resolution and authentic connection that might address underlying problems. My growing willingness to consider direct communication with Lisa about the theft and her cruel comments represented a significant shift from my previous focus on maintaining family harmony at the expense of personal dignity and legitimate boundaries. The mediation program at Murphy's Pawn Shop provided a structured framework for this communication that felt manageable and potentially productive. Similarly, my recognition that David's emotional limitations might require direct address rather than continued accommodation marked movement toward authentic relationship engagement that honored both my needs and his capacity for growth. The possibility that honest conversation about our compatibility and communication patterns might strengthen our relationship or clarify our fundamental differences felt preferable to continued pretense and superficial connection. These emerging commitments to authentic communication and professional challenge represented the first concrete steps toward the person I might become through engaging with, rather than avoiding the changes that Lisa's betrayal had initiated. The crisis that had initially felt like devastating disruption was beginning to reveal itself as potential catalyst for growth that had been long overdue but previously avoided due to comfort with familiar limitations and predictable outcomes. The decision to accept the merger project leadership role at Morrison & Associates necessitated expanding my professional network beyond the comfortable boundaries of established client relationships and familiar colleague interactions. This requirement coincided with growing recognition that navigating personal challenges with Lisa and David would benefit from additional perspectives and resources beyond Jennifer's supportive friendship and my own analytical capabilities. The merger project involved consolidating financial operations for two established restaurant chains that had maintained different accounting systems, vendor relationships, and operational procedures throughout their independent histories. Successfully integrating these complex business structures required collaborative relationships with legal advisors, industry consultants, and financial specialists who possessed expertise beyond my traditional accounting background. My first strategic alliance formed with Margaret Torres, a corporate attorney specializing in restaurant industry transactions who had earned recognition throughout the Pacific Northwest for her ability to navigate complex regulatory requirements while maintaining focus on practical business outcomes. Margaret possessed the professional confidence and direct communication style that I had previously found intimidating, but now recognized as essential for effective leadership in challenging circumstances. Our initial consultation revealed that Margaret had extensive experience with family business disputes involving inherited assets and ownership succession issues. Her perspective on legal remedies for property recovery proved invaluable for understanding my options regarding the grandmother's ring situation, but her insights about family dynamics and communication strategies provided unexpected wisdom that extended far beyond legal technicalities. Margaret's approach to conflict resolution emphasized clear boundaries and direct communication, while maintaining respect for all parties involved in disputes. She had observed that family conflicts often escalated due to avoidance and indirect communication patterns that prevented honest discussion of underlying issues and legitimate grievances. Her recommendation to address Lisa's theft through structured mediation aligned perfectly with the program Thomas Murphy had described at his pawn shop. More significantly, Margaret's questions about my relationship with David revealed her acute understanding of how crisis situations expose fundamental compatibility issues that had previously remained hidden beneath comfortable routines and shared practical interests. Her observation that my description of David's response suggested potential long-term communication challenges resonated with emerging concerns that I had been reluctant to articulate or examine directly. Margaret's professional experience with couples navigating business partnerships had taught her to recognize early warning signs of relationship dynamics that typically created problems during stressful periods, requiring mutual support and collaborative decision-making. Her tactful suggestion that relationship counseling might provide valuable insight into communication patterns and compatibility issues presented this option as strategic planning rather than admission of failure. The second crucial alliance developed through the merger project involved collaboration with Dr. Patricia Kim, an organizational psychologist who specialized in change management for companies undergoing significant structural transitions. Dr. Kim's role required helping employees and management teams adapt to new procedures and relationships, while maintaining productivity and morale during inevitably disruptive adjustment periods. Dr. Kim's expertise in human behavior during transition phases provided frameworks for understanding my own psychological responses to personal and professional challenges that had previously seemed overwhelming and chaotic. Her academic background in resilience research and practical experience with individuals adapting to major life changes offered evidence-based approaches to stress management and personal development that complemented Margaret's legal and strategic perspectives. During our professional collaboration, Dr. Kim shared insights about how crisis situations often create opportunities for individuals to develop capabilities and confidence that would never emerge within comfortable, predictable circumstances. Her research indicated that people who successfully navigate significant challenges typically emerge with enhanced self-knowledge, improved relationship skills, and increased capacity for future difficulties that might have previously felt insurmountable. This scientific validation of Jennifer's intuitive observations about crisis as opportunity provided additional support for my growing belief that current difficulties with Lisa and David might serve important developmental purposes despite their immediate emotional cost and practical complications. Dr. Kim's professional credibility and research-based approach made these concepts feel less like wishful thinking and more like evidence-based strategies for personal growth and resilience building. Dr. Kim's questions about my stress management techniques and support systems revealed significant gaps in my approach to maintaining emotional equilibrium during challenging periods. Her assessment suggested that my tendency toward social isolation during difficulties had been preventing me from accessing resources and perspectives that could facilitate more effective coping strategies and problem-solving approaches. Her recommendations for building stronger support networks emphasized the importance of diversifying sources of emotional support, practical assistance, and professional guidance, rather than relying exclusively on romantic partnerships or immediate family members for all types of relationship needs. This perspective challenged my assumptions about appropriate relationship boundaries and suggested that my previous self-reliance might have been limiting rather than strengthening my capacity for handling complex challenges. The third significant alliance emerged through Margaret Torres's referral to Elena Vasquez, a certified mediator who had specialized in family disputes for over 15 years and maintained particular expertise in cases involving inherited property and sibling conflicts. Elena's background included extensive training in conflict resolution and therapeutic communication techniques that could facilitate productive conversations between family members with long-standing resentments and misunderstandings. Elena's initial assessment of my situation with Lisa involved detailed exploration of our family history, communication patterns, and individual personalities to determine whether mediation offered realistic potential for resolution or would likely prove ineffective, given the severity of trust violations and emotional damage. Her thorough evaluation process demonstrated professional commitment to successful outcomes, rather than simply providing services regardless of appropriateness or likelihood of positive results. Elena's questions about my childhood relationship with Lisa revealed patterns of enabling and conflict avoidance that had been present for decades but had never been explicitly recognized or addressed. Her observation that my tendency to accommodate Lisa's irresponsible behavior had likely contributed to escalating boundary violations resonated with similar insights from Margaret and Dr. Kim about the importance of clear communication and appropriate limits in healthy relationships. More encouragingly, Elena expressed optimism about potential for productive mediation based on my demonstrated commitment to family relationship repair and willingness to examine my own contributions to problematic dynamics. Her assessment suggested that individuals with strong analytical skills and genuine desire for understanding often proved successful in mediation processes that required honest self-reflection and collaborative problem-solving approaches. Elena's explanation of the mediation process emphasized preparation and goal-setting phases that would occur before any direct communication with Lisa. This structured approach appealed to my preference for systematic planning while addressing my concerns about emotional confrontation and potential for additional hurtful interactions that could damage our relationship further. The fourth crucial alliance formed through Jennifer's introduction to her friend Rebecca Santos, a financial advisor who specialized in helping individuals navigate major life transitions involving career changes, relationship decisions, and family circumstances that required strategic planning and resource management. Rebecca's expertise proved particularly relevant given the intersection of personal and professional challenges that had been affecting my decision-making capabilities and long-term planning processes. Rebecca's assessment of my financial situation revealed greater stability and flexibility than I had previously recognized, creating possibilities for pursuing personal and professional goals that had seemed financially impossible during the stress and uncertainty following Lisa's theft. Her analysis suggested that my conservative approach to spending and saving had created resources that could support counseling, mediation, legal proceedings, and other investments in personal development and relationship health. More importantly, Rebecca's questions about my long-term goals and values revealed significant disconnection between my current life circumstances and my authentic aspirations for meaningful work and fulfilling relationships. Her observation that many of her clients discovered during crisis periods that their previous life choices had been driven by fear and external expectations rather than genuine personal values resonated powerfully with my emerging self-awareness. Rebecca's expertise in financial planning for major life transitions provided practical frameworks for evaluating potential changes in career direction, living arrangements, and relationship commitments that might emerge from successful resolution of current challenges. Her professional guidance transformed abstract possibilities for personal growth into concrete options with realistic timelines and resource requirements. The fifth significant alliance developed through Dr. Kim's referral to Thomas Chen, a career counselor who specialized in helping mid-career professionals transition into leadership roles and expand their professional influence within their chosen fields. Thomas's background included extensive experience with individuals who had previously avoided leadership opportunities due to perfectionism and fear of failure, but possessed strong technical skills and analytical capabilities that could translate effectively into management and strategic roles. Thomas's career assessment revealed that my technical competence and reliability had created strong professional reputation among colleagues and clients that could support advancement into more challenging and rewarding positions. His evaluation suggested that my tendency towards self-criticism and modest expectations had been preventing me from recognizing and pursuing opportunities that matched my actual capabilities and potential for professional growth. Thomas's insights about the relationship between personal confidence and professional advancement helped connect my individual therapy and relationship work with career development goals that had previously seemed separate and unrelated. His observation that individuals who develop stronger self-advocacy skills and clearer personal boundaries typically experience corresponding improvements in professional effectiveness and leadership capacity provided additional motivation for addressing personal challenges rather than compartmentalizing them. The collective wisdom and support provided by this diverse group of professional allies created a comprehensive foundation for addressing both immediate crisis resolution and longer-term personal development goals. Margaret's legal and strategic expertise, Dr. Kim's psychological insights, Elena's mediation skills, Rebecca's financial guidance, and Thomas's career counseling formed an interconnected support system that addressed multiple aspects of my situation, with complementary approaches and shared commitment to authentic growth and sustainable change. The process of building these professional relationships required overcoming long-standing patterns of self-reliance and reluctance to seek assistance from individuals outside my immediate personal circle. Each new alliance demanded vulnerability and honest communication about challenges and goals that I had previously considered too private or overwhelming to discuss with anyone other than intimate friends or family members. However, the investment in building these relationships proved transformative in ways that extended far beyond their immediate practical benefits. Each professional interaction provided evidence that my challenges were neither unique nor insurmountable, while simultaneously demonstrating that seeking expert guidance represented wisdom and strength rather than weakness or inadequacy. The emergence of my primary mentor occurred through circumstances that appeared coincidental, but would later reveal themselves as precisely timed encounters that often characterize significant life transitions. During the third week of leading the merger project at Morrison & Associates, I encountered Grace Leo, the recently retired Chief Financial Officer of Pacific Restaurant Holdings. one of the largest hospitality groups in the northwestern United States. Grace had built her career from entry-level bookkeeping positions to executive leadership over a span of 35 years, navigating industry changes, economic recessions, and complex family business dynamics, while maintaining reputation for integrity and strategic vision that had earned her recognition throughout the regional business community. Her retirement from active corporate leadership had been voluntary rather than forced, reflecting careful planning and desire to transition into consulting and mentoring activities that could benefit emerging professionals while providing personal fulfillment. Pacific Restaurant Holdings represented one of the companies involved in our merger project, requiring extensive consultation with Grace regarding historical financial practices and operational procedures that needed integration with the acquiring organization. Her expertise proved invaluable for understanding complex accounting systems and vendor relationships that had been developed over decades of steady growth and strategic expansion. However, Grace's observations about my leadership approach during project meetings revealed insights that extended far beyond technical accounting issues and merger logistics. She noted my tendency to seek consensus before making decisions that were clearly within my authority as project leader, suggesting patterns of self-doubt and external validation seeking that could limit effectiveness in senior management roles. Grace's feedback was delivered with directness that initially felt challenging but demonstrated respect for my capabilities and potential for professional growth. Her observations were accompanied by specific examples of situations where more decisive leadership would have accelerated project progress, while building confidence among team members who looked to me for direction and strategic guidance. More significantly, Grace recognized emotional undercurrents that were affecting my professional performance, despite my attempts to compartmentalize personal challenges and maintain focus exclusively on work-related responsibilities. Her questions about stress management and work-life balance revealed her understanding that personal development and professional success were interconnected, rather than separate domains requiring independent attention. Grace's willingness to address these broader life issues reflected mentoring philosophy developed through years of observing how personal circumstances affected professional performance among colleagues and subordinates. Her experience had taught her that individuals who successfully navigated complex career challenges typically possessed strong support systems and clear personal boundaries that enabled sustained high performance during demanding periods. During our fourth consultation meeting, Grace shifted from technical project discussions to more personal conversation about career development goals and long-term aspirations for professional growth and personal fulfillment. Her questions revealed genuine interest in my individual circumstances, rather than generic career advice that could apply to any ambitious professional seeking advancement opportunities. Grace's inquiry about my family background and support systems opened conversation about the crisis with Lisa and the complicated dynamics with David that had been creating stress and uncertainty during this crucial career development period. Her response demonstrated both professional wisdom and personal understanding that transformed our working relationship into authentic mentoring connection. Grace shared her own experiences with family betrayal that had occurred during her early career development, describing how her brother had embezzled funds from their family business during a period when she was establishing credibility in her first management position. The parallels between her situation and mine were striking enough to create an immediate sense of understanding and validation that I had not experienced through conversations with other professional allies. Grace's description of how she had handled family crisis while maintaining career advancement revealed strategies for compartmentalization and boundary setting that had protected her professional development without requiring complete disconnection from family relationships. Her approach emphasized clear limits on time and emotional energy devoted to family drama while maintaining commitment to personal integrity and appropriate support for family members who demonstrated genuine desire for positive change. More importantly, Grace explained how the experience of handling family betrayal during career development had ultimately strengthened her leadership capabilities and emotional intelligence in ways that proved invaluable throughout subsequent professional challenges. The crisis had forced her to develop internal resources and external relationships that enhanced rather than hindered her capacity for executive responsibility and strategic decision-making. Grace's perspective on using personal challenges as catalysts for professional development provided framework for understanding how my current difficulties with Lisa and David might serve important developmental purposes, rather than simply representing obstacles to overcome or endure. Her insights suggested that individuals who successfully integrated personal growth with career advancement often emerged as more effective leaders with greater emotional intelligence and resilience. The mentoring relationship with Grace evolved from project consultation to regular monthly meetings focused on career development and personal leadership philosophy. These sessions combined practical guidance about business strategy and management techniques with deeper exploration of values, communication styles, and long-term vision for professional contribution and personal fulfillment. Grace's mentoring approach emphasized questioning rather than advice-giving, helping me discover insights and solutions through guided self-reflection rather than simply providing answers to immediate problems. Her questions about my relationship with David revealed patterns of conflict avoidance and people-pleasing that were limiting both personal and professional effectiveness. Grace observed that my tendency to accommodate others, communication styles, and emotional limitations had been preventing me from developing authentic leadership voice and clear personal boundaries that executive roles require. Her assessment suggested that successful career advancement would necessitate greater comfort with direct communication and appropriate conflict when circumstances required decisive action or difficult conversations. These insights about professional communication paralleled feedback I had been receiving from Elena regarding family relationship patterns, creating convergent evidence that fundamental changes in communication style and boundary setting would benefit multiple areas of my life simultaneously. Grace's professional credibility and business success provided powerful validation for therapeutic insights that might otherwise have seemed purely personal rather than strategically important for career development. Grace's guidance regarding the decision-making process for major life changes proved particularly valuable as I began considering whether my relationship with David possessed sufficient foundation for long-term commitment, and whether my current career trajectory aligned with authentic personal values and aspirations. Her framework for evaluating important decisions emphasized alignment between actions and values, rather than external expectations or fear-based choices that might provide temporary security while limiting long-term fulfillment. The decision-making framework that Grace taught involved systematic evaluation of potential outcomes against clearly defined personal values and long-term vision for meaningful contribution. This approach required clarity about authentic priorities and willingness to make choices that might involve temporary discomfort or uncertainty, but would ultimately support sustainable happiness and professional satisfaction. Grace's questions about my vision for meaningful work and fulfilling relationships revealed significant disconnection between my current circumstances and deeper aspirations for impact and connection that I had been suppressing due to concerns about practicality and security. Her observation that many successful professionals had navigated similar transitions during their 30s suggested that my current questioning represented normal developmental process rather than crisis or failure. More encouraging, Grace expressed confidence in my capabilities for handling whatever changes might emerge from honest evaluation of relationships and career direction. Her assessment of my analytical skills, emotional intelligence, and ethical standards suggested strong foundation for successful navigation of complex personal and professional transitions that might initially feel overwhelming or risky. Grace's influence extended beyond career guidance to encompass broader life philosophy and approach to meaningful contribution. Her questions about legacy and long-term impact challenged me to consider whether my current focus on security and stability was limiting potential for significant contribution to community and professional field. Grace's own transition from executive leadership to mentoring and community service provided model for how career success could evolve into broader contribution that benefited others, while maintaining personal fulfillment and continued growth. Her example demonstrated that professional development was a lifelong process that could encompass multiple phases of contribution and service rather than linear progression toward single definition of success. The relationship with Grace also provided introduction to a broader network of professional women who had successfully navigated career advancement while maintaining personal integrity and authentic relationships. These connections offered additional perspectives on balancing professional ambition with personal values, and provided evidence that successful career development was compatible with healthy family relationships and community involvement. Through Grace's mentoring, I began developing clearer vision for professional contribution that extended beyond current technical competencies to encompass leadership development and strategic impact within the accounting and business advisory field. This expanded vision required personal growth and relationship skills that connected directly with therapeutic work. I was beginning through Elena's mediation program and potential counseling with David. Grace's guidance helped me understand that personal development and professional advancement were mutually reinforcing processes, rather than competing priorities requiring careful balance. Her mentoring provided evidence that investing in authentic communication skills, emotional intelligence, and clear boundaries would enhance rather than hinder career progression while improving relationship satisfaction and personal fulfillment. The comprehensive nature of Grace's mentoring influence created foundation for integrating insights from various professional allies into coherent strategy for personal and professional development. Her wisdom provided overarching framework for understanding how individual therapeutic work, family relationship repair, and career advancement could support each other in creating more authentic and satisfying life direction that honored both practical needs and deeper aspirations for meaningful contribution and genuine connection. The implementation of insights gained from my growing network of professional allies required translating theoretical understanding into concrete actions that would test my emerging commitment to authentic communication and personal growth. Grace's mentoring had provided frameworks for decision-making and leadership development, while Elena's mediation expertise offered structured approaches for addressing family conflicts with professional support and strategic planning. My first significant attempt at applying these new approaches involved scheduling the initial mediation session with Elena to address the theft of my grandmother's ring and the underlying relationship dynamics with Lisa that had contributed to this crisis. This decision represented a fundamental shift from my previous pattern of avoiding direct confrontation in favor of hoping for natural resolution through time and indirect communication efforts. Elena's preparation process for family mediation proved more comprehensive and emotionally demanding than I had anticipated, requiring extensive exploration of childhood experiences, family communication patterns, and personal triggers that might emerge during direct conversation with Lisa about her betrayal and substance abuse issues. The preparatory work involved both individual sessions and structured exercises designed to clarify my goals for the mediation process beyond simple property recovery. Elena's assessment revealed that my primary objectives extended far beyond retrieving my grandmother's ring to encompass rebuilding trust, establishing clear boundaries, and creating sustainable communication patterns that could support healthy family relationships, despite Lisa's ongoing struggles with addiction and personal responsibility. These broader goals required careful planning and emotional preparation that acknowledged the complexity of family dynamics while maintaining realistic expectations about potential outcomes. The individual preparation sessions with Elena included extensive role-playing exercises where I practiced expressing my feelings about Lisa's betrayal while maintaining focus on behavior change and boundary setting, rather than blame assignment or character attacks that could derail productive conversation. These exercises revealed how deeply my conflict avoidance patterns had been ingrained and how much effort would be required to communicate directly about legitimate grievances and relationship expectations. Elena's guidance emphasized the importance of distinguishing between forgiveness and trust rebuilding, helping me understand that emotional healing could occur independently of decisions about future relationship boundaries and practical arrangements. This distinction proved crucial for approaching the mediation with appropriate emotional preparation, while maintaining clarity about behavioral expectations and consequences for future boundary violations. The preparation process also involved developing concrete proposals for ring recovery that addressed both the practical aspects of property return and the symbolic significance of family heirloom restoration. Elena helped me articulate the emotional impact of Lisa's theft in terms that acknowledged her struggles, while clearly communicating how her actions had affected my sense of family security and trust in our relationship. Simultaneously, I began implementing Grace's guidance about professional leadership development through more decisive management of the merger project at Morrison & Associates. This involved practicing direct communication with team members who had been accustomed to my consensus-seeking approach and implementing clearer project timelines with specific accountability measures for deliverable completion. The transition to more directive leadership initially created discomfort among team members who had grown comfortable with collaborative decision-making processes that often delayed project progress while ensuring everyone felt heard and valued. My attempts to balance efficiency with relationship maintenance required constant recalibration as I learned to distinguish between situations requiring consensus building and those demanding decisive action from project leadership. Margaret Torres provided valuable coaching regarding professional communication techniques that maintained respectful relationships while establishing clear authority and accountability standards. Her legal background had taught her to combine firmness with diplomacy in ways that achieved practical objectives, while preserving working relationships that might require future collaboration. The application of these enhanced communication skills in professional settings provided valuable practice opportunities for similar approaches in personal relationships, where stakes felt higher and emotional triggers were more intense. Success in implementing clearer boundaries and expectations with work colleagues built confidence for addressing more challenging dynamics with David and Lisa. My first attempt at direct communication with David about relationship concerns involved carefully planned conversation about our different approaches to emotional support and crisis management. This discussion required acknowledging my own contributions to communication problems, while clearly articulating my needs for greater emotional intimacy and authentic connection during challenging periods. David's response to this conversation revealed the extent of our compatibility challenges, while also demonstrating his capacity for honest self-reflection and relationship commitment. His acknowledgement that he had been uncomfortable with emotional intensity and unsure how to provide support during my family crisis represented important progress in our communication, though it also highlighted fundamental differences in our approaches to intimacy and vulnerability. The conversation with David included exploration of whether professional counseling might help us develop more effective communication patterns and greater understanding of each other's emotional needs and relationship expectations. His willingness to consider couples therapy represented significant departure from his typical preference for handling relationship issues through individual effort and practical problem-solving approaches. However, David's suggestion that we postpone counseling until after resolution of my family crisis reflected his continued compartmentalization of relationship issues and resistance to understanding how his emotional availability affected my capacity to handle external challenges effectively. This response indicated that our fundamental differences regarding emotional intimacy might require more extensive work than either of us had previously recognized. The third major action area involved beginning individual therapy with Dr. Sarah Hoffman, a clinical psychologist who specialized in family dynamics and adult development issues. Dr. Kim's referral to Dr. Hoffman reflected assessment that my personal growth goals would benefit from therapeutic support that complemented the practical guidance I was receiving from career and financial advisors. Dr. Hoffman's initial assessment involved comprehensive exploration of family history, relationship patterns, and personal development goals that provided broader context for understanding how childhood experiences had influenced my adult approaches to conflict resolution and emotional intimacy. This therapeutic framework helped explain why Lisa's betrayal had been so devastating and why David's response had felt inadequate rather than simply disappointing. The individual therapy process revealed how my family role as the responsible, reliable daughter had created patterns of people-pleasing and conflict avoidance that extended throughout my adult relationships. Dr. Hoffman helped me understand how these patterns had been adaptive during childhood, but were limiting my capacity for authentic relationships and personal fulfillment in adult contexts. The therapeutic work included exploring my relationship with control and predictability as strategies for managing anxiety about uncertainty and rejection. Dr. Hoffman's insights about how excessive self-reliance might be preventing me from developing healthy interdependence in romantic relationships provided framework for understanding David's emotional distance as potential response to my own barriers to vulnerability and authentic connection. These individual therapy sessions complemented Elena's mediation preparation by providing deeper understanding of personal triggers and defensive patterns that might emerge during direct confrontation with Lisa about her betrayal and substance abuse issues. The therapeutic work helped me develop greater emotional regulation skills and clearer sense of personal boundaries that would support productive communication, regardless of Lisa's responses or willingness to engage constructively. The fourth area of initial action involved implementing Rebecca's financial planning recommendations for creating greater flexibility and resources to support personal development investments. This included restructuring savings allocations to accommodate therapy costs, mediation expenses, and potential legal fees associated with ring recovery, while maintaining financial security and professional development funding. Rebecca's guidance about viewing personal development expenses as investments rather than costs helped reframe my relationship with spending on counseling, coaching, and professional development activities. Her analysis demonstrated that individuals who invested in personal growth and relationship skills typically experienced improved career advancement and life satisfaction that justified initial financial commitments. The financial planning process also included evaluation of my current living arrangements and relationship commitments to determine whether changes might be necessary based on outcomes of mediation with Lisa and counseling exploration with David. Rebecca's objective analysis of various scenario possibilities provided practical framework for making decisions based on authentic preferences rather than financial constraints or security concerns. The cumulative effect of these initial implementation efforts created momentum that extended beyond specific action areas to influence my overall approach to decision-making and relationship management. The experience of taking concrete steps toward addressing long-standing patterns and relationship issues provided evidence that change was possible, and that my capacity for handling uncertainty had been significantly underestimated. Each successful conversation or implemented boundary created confidence for addressing increasingly challenging relationship dynamics and personal development goals. The practice opportunities provided by professional settings transferred effectively to personal contexts, where similar communication skills and leadership approaches proved valuable for expressing needs and expectations more clearly. However, these initial attempts also revealed the extent of resistance and adjustment required for sustainable change in established relationship patterns and personal habits. David's discomfort with increased emotional directness, my own anxiety about potential conflict escalation, and uncertainty about Lisa's willingness to engage constructively in mediation created ongoing challenges that required sustained commitment and professional support. The recognition that meaningful change required persistent effort and tolerance for temporary discomfort represented important learning that informed subsequent decisions about relationship investments and personal development priorities. The initial attempts had provided valuable information about my own capabilities and limitations while clarifying which relationships possessed potential for growth and which might require more fundamental changes or boundaries. The carefully constructed momentum from my initial attempts at implementing change encountered its first significant disruption when Lisa failed to appear for the scheduled mediation session with Elena. Her absence was not communicated in advance, leaving both Elena and myself waiting for 45 minutes in the mediation center conference room before acknowledging that she had chosen not to participate in the process I had hoped would facilitate resolution of our family crisis. Elena's professional experience with family mediation had prepared her for the possibility that one party might withdraw from the process. But her subsequent conversation with me revealed that Lisa's failure to participate represented more than simple scheduling conflict or last-minute hesitation. Elena had received a voicemail message from Lisa 2 hours after our scheduled appointment time, stating that she did not wish to engage in mediation, and considered the matter resolved since she had already sold the ring and used the proceeds for legitimate expenses. Lisa's message contained additional hurtful content that demonstrated her continued resentment toward what she characterized as my controlling behavior and unrealistic expectations for family relationships. She specifically stated that my pursuit of mediation represented evidence of the rigid, unforgiving personality traits that would prevent me from maintaining successful romantic relationships throughout my adult life. The devastating impact of this rejection extended beyond disappointment about ring recovery to encompass profound questions about my judgment regarding family loyalty and the possibility of meaningful reconciliation with someone whose substance abuse issues had apparently progressed to the point where professional intervention felt threatening rather than supportive. Elena's assessment suggested that Lisa's refusal to participate indicated deeper psychological issues that might require more intensive treatment than family mediation could provide. Elena's guidance following Lisa's withdrawal from mediation emphasized that her refusal to engage constructively did not reflect failure on my part or invalidate the personal growth work I had been developing through our preparation sessions. She explained that individuals struggling with addiction often resist structured communication processes that require accountability and self-reflection, preferring to maintain familiar patterns of blame and avoidance rather than confronting their own behavior and its impact on family relationships. However, the practical implications of Lisa's non-participation created significant complications for ring recovery through the legal system. Margaret Torres explained that civil litigation for property recovery would require substantially more time and financial resources than mediation, while offering uncertain prospects for successful outcome, particularly given the complexity of proving ownership of inherited items sold by family members with legitimate identification documents. Margaret's legal assessment indicated that pursuing court action might ultimately cost more than the ring's monetary value, while creating additional emotional trauma and family division that could extend far beyond the immediate property dispute. Her recommendation to consider whether the ring's symbolic significance justified the emotional and financial costs of extended legal proceedings forced me to confront difficult questions about priorities and resource allocation during this challenging period. The setback with Lisa's mediation withdrawal coincided with unexpected complications in the merger project at Morrison & Associates that tested my developing leadership capabilities under genuine pressure and scrutiny from senior partners and client representatives. The integration of financial systems between the two restaurant chains revealed discrepancies in historical accounting practices that required immediate attention and potential revision of project timelines and deliverable expectations. The technical complexity of reconciling different accounting methodologies proved manageable through systematic analysis in collaboration with Grace Liu's expertise. However, the political dynamics surrounding blame assignment and responsibility acknowledgement created interpersonal challenges that required diplomatic communication skills, while maintaining project momentum and team morale during a stressful investigation period. The pressure of managing these professional complications while processing Lisa's rejection of mediation revealed limitations in my stress management capabilities and emotional regulation skills that had not been tested during more controlled therapeutic and coaching relationships. The intersection of professional responsibility and personal crisis created overwhelming demands on my energy and attention that affected decision-making quality and communication effectiveness in both contexts. David's response to my increased stress and emotional volatility during this challenging period demonstrated the continued limitations in his capacity for providing emotional support and partnership during genuine difficulties. His suggestion that I should focus exclusively on professional responsibilities while postponing personal development work until after project completion reflected his fundamental misunderstanding of how personal and professional challenges interconnect and influence each other. David's compartmentalization approach to crisis management created additional relationship tension during a period when I most needed emotional support and collaborative partnership. His inability to recognize that professional success required personal emotional stability made him feel like an additional source of stress rather than a supportive alliance during challenging circumstances. The couples therapy session we had scheduled to address our communication challenges became an arena for confronting these fundamental differences in our approaches to mutual support and partnership responsibility. Dr. Linda Park, the licensed marriage and family therapist whom David had agreed to see, quickly identified the pattern of emotional disconnection and support inadequacy that had been highlighted by recent stressful circumstances. Dr. Park's assessment during our initial session revealed that David's discomfort with emotional intensity and preference for practical problem-solving represented deeply ingrained patterns that would require sustained therapeutic work to modify effectively. Her evaluation suggested that his emotional limitations stemmed from family background and personal experiences that had taught him to view emotional needs as burdens rather than natural aspects of intimate relationships. More troubling, Dr. Park's questions about our long-term compatibility revealed that David harbored significant doubts about whether romantic relationships should require emotional intimacy and mutual support during difficult periods. His belief that healthy partnerships involved independent individuals who handled personal challenges separately while maintaining pleasant interactions during shared time reflected fundamental relationship philosophy differences that might prove insurmountable despite therapeutic intervention. The revelation that David questioned the basic premises of emotional partnership occurred simultaneously with recognition that my own therapeutic work had been revealing needs for authenticity and intimate connection that exceeded his capacity or willingness to provide. The timing of these realizations during an already challenging period created additional emotional burden that complicated professional responsibilities and personal development goals. The cumulative stress of Lisa's mediation withdrawal, project complications, and relationship revelations began affecting my physical health through disrupted sleep patterns, decreased appetite, and persistent anxiety symptoms that interfered with concentration and decision-making capabilities. Dr. Hoffman's assessment indicated that I was experiencing adjustment disorder symptoms that required immediate attention to prevent more serious psychological complications. Dr. Hoffman's recommendations included temporary modification of therapeutic goals to focus on stress management and emotional regulation, rather than continued exploration of family dynamics and relationship patterns that might prove overwhelming during this acute stress period. Her guidance emphasized the importance of recognizing personal limits and adjusting expectations for simultaneous change across multiple life areas. The recognition that I had been attempting too many significant changes simultaneously provided important learning about pacing and resource management during transformation periods. Dr. Hoffman explained that individuals who successfully navigate major life transitions typically focus on one primary change area while maintaining stability in other aspects of their lives, rather than pursuing comprehensive transformation across all relationship and professional contexts simultaneously. This insight required difficult decisions about prioritizing immediate goals and temporarily postponing some development activities that had felt equally important during earlier stages of my growth process. The need to triage personal development objectives forced recognition that sustainable change required strategic planning and realistic timeline expectations, rather than enthusiastic commitment to simultaneous improvement across all life areas. The setback period also revealed how deeply my identity had become connected to maintaining control and predictability in all aspects of my existence. The experience of facing multiple challenges simultaneously that exceeded my management capabilities triggered profound anxiety about competence and worthiness that required therapeutic attention beyond simple stress management techniques. Dr. Hoffman's exploration of my relationship with failure and imperfection uncovered perfectionist tendencies that had been driving excessive self-criticism and unrealistic expectations for change processes that naturally included setbacks and temporary difficulties. Her guidance about accepting imperfection and partial success as normal aspects of growth represented fundamental shifts in self-evaluation and expectation management. The financial implications of extended therapy, potential legal proceedings, and relationship counseling created additional pressure during a period when project complications at work threatened professional stability and advancement opportunities. Rebecca's financial planning had anticipated some of these costs, but the accumulation of multiple expensive interventions exceeded initial projections while occurring during uncertain professional circumstances. The intersection of financial pressure with emotional and professional challenges created a complex situation that required careful resource allocation and priority setting while maintaining commitment to essential personal development work. The recognition that meaningful change required sustained investment during difficult periods tested my commitment to transformation goals when their costs became more apparent and immediate benefits remained uncertain. These converging obstacles provided the most significant test of my developing resilience and commitment to authentic growth, since Lisa's initial betrayal had catalyzed this entire transformation process. The temptation to retreat into previous patterns of avoidance and control became particularly strong when multiple challenges exceeded my capacity for simultaneous management and threatened both personal and professional stability. The aftermath of the convergent setbacks required systematic analysis to extract meaningful lessons from experiences that had initially felt like comprehensive failures across multiple dimensions of personal and professional development. Dr. Hoffman guided this reflection process through structured sessions that examined each challenge area separately, before exploring interconnections and patterns that revealed valuable insights about sustainable change strategies. The examination of Lisa's mediation withdrawal began with acknowledging the profound disappointment and sense of personal rejection that had accompanied her refusal to engage in structured communication. Dr. Hoffman helped me recognize that my investment in family reconciliation had been based partially on unrealistic expectations about Lisa's readiness for change and accountability, rather than accurate assessment of her current psychological state and commitment to recovery from addiction issues. This recognition required distinguishing between healthy family loyalty and codependent enabling patterns that had characterized much of my relationship with Lisa throughout our adult lives. Dr. Hoffman explained that individuals struggling with substance abuse often resist therapeutic interventions and structured communication precisely because these processes threaten established patterns of denial and external blame that support continued addictive behaviors. The therapeutic exploration revealed that my persistent hope for Lisa's voluntary participation in mediation had reflected my own difficulty accepting the extent of her psychological deterioration and unwillingness to engage in recovery processes. This insight demonstrated how my conflict avoidance patterns had extended beyond direct confrontation to encompass denial about family members, limitations, and choices that affected their capacity for healthy relationships. Dr. Hoffman's guidance emphasized that accepting Lisa's current limitations did not require abandoning family loyalty or hope for eventual recovery. Instead, effective boundary setting meant acknowledging her present choices while protecting my own emotional well-being and resources from manipulation and abuse that would ultimately harm both parties involved in dysfunctional relationship patterns. The process of examining my expectations for Lisa's behavior revealed broader patterns of attempting to control outcomes through careful planning and reasonable approaches that assumed other individuals shared similar values and commitment to relationship health. Dr. Hoffman noted that these assumptions often led to disappointment and self-blame when others made choices that reflected different priorities or psychological states. This insight extended to professional contexts where the merger project complications had initially triggered self-criticism about leadership adequacy and preparation thoroughness. Grace Liu's coaching during this reflection period helped me understand that effective leadership required adapting to unexpected challenges and managing variables beyond individual control, rather than preventing all possible complications through comprehensive planning and preparation efforts. Grace's perspective on the accounting discrepancies that had emerged during the merger process emphasized that these discoveries represented successful due diligence rather than leadership failures. Her experience with similar situations had taught her that complex business integrations typically revealed historical practices and documentation gaps that required skilled problem-solving rather than reflecting inadequate project management or analysis capabilities. The professional challenges had provided valuable opportunities to develop crisis management skills and collaborative leadership approaches under genuine pressure from senior partners and client representatives. Grace's assessment indicated that my performance during these difficult circumstances had actually demonstrated executive potential and earned respect from colleagues who observed my problem-solving capabilities and communication effectiveness during stressful negotiations. This reframing of professional setbacks as development opportunities rather than performance failures required adjusting expectations about leadership development processes. Grace explained that individuals who successfully advance to senior management positions typically encounter numerous challenging situations that test their capabilities while providing essential learning experiences that inform future decision-making and strategic planning approaches. The examination of relationship revelations with David through couples therapy with Dr. Park required confronting uncomfortable truths about compatibility issues that had been present throughout our relationship but had remained hidden beneath comfortable routines and shared practical interests. The therapeutic process had revealed fundamental differences in emotional intimacy expectations and partnership philosophy that might prove insurmountable despite mutual respect and affection. Dr. Hoffman's individual therapy sessions explored my own contributions to relationship dynamics that had prevented earlier recognition of these compatibility problems. The analysis revealed how my conflict avoidance patterns had led me to accommodate David's emotional limitations rather than addressing them directly, creating relationship patterns that felt stable but lacked authentic intimacy and mutual support during challenging circumstances. The recognition that I had been settling for relationship security rather than genuine partnership represented painful but necessary insight about my own fears of vulnerability and intimacy. Dr. Hoffman helped me understand that my preference for predictable, low-conflict relationships had been protecting me from potential rejection, while also preventing the deep connection and authentic communication that satisfying partnerships require. This self-awareness extended to understanding why David's emotional distance during my family crisis had felt so devastating. The therapeutic exploration revealed that I had been unconsciously hoping that external challenges would create opportunities for deeper intimacy and partnership development, rather than recognizing that his emotional limitations were consistent personality characteristics, rather than temporary responses to specific situations. The couple's therapy sessions with Dr. Park had provided valuable information about David's capacity for change and investment in relationship development. His acknowledgement of emotional discomfort and willingness to explore communication patterns represented genuine effort, but his fundamental belief system about relationship expectations suggested that substantial modification would require extensive therapeutic work with uncertain outcomes. Dr. Park's assessment indicated that successful relationship transformation would require both partners to demonstrate sustained commitment to personal growth and communication skill development over extended periods. Her evaluation of our specific dynamics suggested that the gap between our current interaction patterns and healthy partnership requirements might exceed what could be addressed through couples therapy alone. The financial implications of multiple therapeutic interventions and potential legal proceedings had created stress that revealed important information about my relationship with money and security. Rebecca's financial counseling during this period helped me understand that my anxiety about resources reflected deeper fears about independence and capacity for self-support during uncertain circumstances. Rebecca's analysis of my financial position demonstrated that therapy and personal development investments were sustainable within my current resources, while also creating long-term value through improved decision-making capabilities and relationship skills. Her perspective helped reframe therapeutic expenses as strategic investments, rather than emergency spending that threatened financial security and stability. The exploration of money anxieties revealed how financial concerns had been influencing relationship choices and personal development decisions in ways that prioritized security over authentic fulfillment. Rebecca's guidance about creating financial plans that supported personal values and growth goals provided framework for making decisions based on genuine priorities rather than fear-based limitations. The physical symptoms that had emerged during the convergent stress period required medical evaluation that confirmed Dr. Hoffman's assessment of adjustment disorder, while also revealing how psychological stress had been affecting my overall health and well-being. The medical consultation provided concrete evidence that sustainable change required attention to physical self-care and stress management alongside therapeutic and professional development work. The integration of medical recommendations with therapeutic and coaching guidance created a comprehensive approach to stress management that addressed multiple aspects of health and wellness. This holistic perspective demonstrated that personal transformation required attending to physical, emotional, and professional dimensions simultaneously rather than focusing exclusively on psychological or relationship development. The experience of managing multiple health and wellness interventions provided valuable practice in self-advocacy and resource coordination that transferred effectively to professional leadership contexts. The skills required for communicating with various healthcare providers and integrating their recommendations paralleled executive capabilities for managing complex projects and diverse stakeholder relationships. The reflection process guided by Dr. Hoffman also examined my perfectionist tendencies and unrealistic expectations for transformation timelines. The recognition that I had been attempting too many significant changes simultaneously revealed underlying beliefs about personal adequacy and worth that required examination through therapeutic work focused on self-compassion and realistic goal-setting approaches. Dr. Hoffman's exploration of perfectionism patterns helped me understand that my tendency to pursue comprehensive improvement across all life areas reflected anxiety about personal value and fear of judgment from others. This insight explained why setbacks had triggered such intense self-criticism and doubt about fundamental worthiness and capability for successful change. The therapeutic work on self-compassion involved developing internal dialogue patterns that supported sustained effort through difficult periods, rather than undermining motivation through harsh self-evaluation and unrealistic standard enforcement. Dr. Hoffman taught practical techniques for maintaining perspective during challenging circumstances, while preserving commitment to important growth goals and values. The cumulative insights from examining each setback area individually and collectively provided foundation for developing more realistic and sustainable approaches to personal transformation. The lessons learned about pacing, resource management, expectation setting, and self-compassion would prove essential for navigating subsequent challenges while maintaining progress toward authentic fulfillment and meaningful relationships. The recognition that failure experiences contained valuable information about personal limitations, relationship dynamics, and change processes transformed my relationship with difficulty and uncertainty. Rather than viewing setbacks as evidence of inadequacy or poor judgment, I began understanding them as natural components of growth that provided essential feedback for strategy refinement and skill development. The systematic extraction of wisdom from recent setbacks provided the foundation for developing comprehensive resilience-building strategies that would support sustained personal transformation while protecting against future psychological and emotional depletion. Dr. Hoffman's therapeutic framework emphasized that resilience represented learnable capabilities rather than innate personality characteristics, requiring deliberate practice and skill development through structured approaches to stress management and emotional regulation. The resilience-building process began with establishing consistent daily practices that supported physical and emotional stability regardless of external circumstances or relationship challenges. Dr. Hoffman's recommendations included morning meditation sessions using guided mindfulness applications that provided structured approaches to anxiety management and emotional centering before engaging with professional responsibilities and interpersonal interactions throughout each day. The meditation practice initially proved challenging due to my tendency toward mental hyperactivity and concern about productivity loss from activities that did not produce measurable outcomes or concrete progress toward specific objectives. However, sustained commitment to this practice revealed significant improvements in concentration capabilities and emotional regulation during stressful situations that more than compensated for the time investment through enhanced decision-making quality and reduced recovery time from difficult interactions. Dr. Hoffman's guidance emphasized that meditation effectiveness required consistent practice rather than perfect execution, encouraging persistence through initial discomfort and distraction rather than abandonment, due to unrealistic expectations about immediate mastery or dramatic emotional transformation. This approach to skill development proved applicable to other areas of personal growth where progress occurred gradually through sustained effort rather than breakthrough moments. The second component of resilience building involved establishing physical exercise routines that provided stress relief and emotional regulation benefits alongside health and fitness improvements. Grace Liu's mentoring had revealed that successful executives typically maintained consistent physical activity schedules that supported energy management and cognitive clarity during demanding professional periods. The integration of regular exercise into my weekly schedule required addressing long-standing beliefs about time allocation and productivity optimization that had previously discouraged investment in activities without direct professional or personal development outcomes. Rebecca's financial planning perspective helped reframe exercise as investment in long-term capability and performance, rather than luxury consumption that competed with more important priorities. The exercise routine development process revealed patterns of all-or-nothing thinking that had characterized many previous attempts at habit formation and personal improvement. Dr. Hoffman's guidance about starting with manageable commitments and gradually increasing intensity and duration provided sustainable approach to physical activity that maintained motivation through initial adjustment periods while building genuine lifestyle changes rather than temporary modifications. The third resilience-building area involved developing emotional regulation techniques that could be applied during challenging interpersonal interactions and stressful professional situations. Dr. Hoffman taught specific breathing exercises and cognitive reframing strategies that provided immediate stress relief, while supporting clearer thinking and more effective communication during difficult circumstances. These emotional regulation skills proved particularly valuable during continued interactions with David, as we worked through relationship compatibility questions and potential separation decisions. The techniques provided alternatives to previous patterns of conflict avoidance and emotional shutdown that had prevented authentic communication while creating internal stress and relationship dissatisfaction. The application of emotional regulation techniques in professional contexts supported more confident leadership during the merger project completion phases, while building credibility with senior partners who observed improved performance under pressure. The enhanced emotional stability created opportunities for taking on additional challenging assignments that accelerated career development and professional recognition. The fourth component of resilience development focused on establishing healthy boundaries in family relationships that protected emotional well-being, while maintaining appropriate connection and support for family members who demonstrated commitment to positive change. Elena's mediation expertise provided frameworks for boundary setting that preserved family loyalty, while preventing manipulation and emotional abuse that had characterized previous interactions with Lisa. The boundary development process required ongoing therapeutic support to address guilt and anxiety that emerged when establishing limits on availability and support for family members who had previously relied on unlimited access to emotional resources and practical assistance. Dr. Hoffman helped distinguish between healthy family responsibility and codependent enabling that ultimately harmed both parties through preventing accountability and personal growth. Up next, you've got two more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.